was my bright idea to make some sort of major change. The first 2 months, people are coming into you with reports, and you're looking at them and thinking, "No wonder how much longer until I'm fired. This is really bad." In Burlington, Vermont. One snowy November day, I got a phone call from our corporate headquarters that wanted to interview me for the vice president of circulation position at the old Hawaii newspaper agency. It was 17 degrees below zero outside. When I got off the plane, it was 84 degrees, and so that was quite a difference. And I was happy to be in Hawaii, and it was love at first sight. What made me decide to make the switch, somewhat of a complicated answer, because I was being asked to do that by the owner of the Star Bulletin, David Black. I had initially said no, maybe even 5 times. But in the end, when I made my decision, it was the chance to really take the leap and leave my comfort zone a little bit. This position as being president of the company, it's one of the things that our owner made quite clear to me. I have complete control of how I want to run these newspapers, both editorially and marketing-wise. I'm a big proponent of ready, fire, aim approach, because too many times people get caught up in planning, and by the time you polish off your last slide on your PowerPoint, when you pull the trigger, you're missing. I dropped out. It was a decision I made at the time. It was easy when you're young. You think that the world was ready for you, and I was earning good money, but I loved what I was doing, and I didn't feel like it was work. If I was advising someone and they were going to do what I did, I would tell them not to. He's going to stay in school. Because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for the masses. Try to get involved in the community in ways that not only benefit and help yourself grow, but also have impact with the masses. Get involved in something that's more grassroots, because you'll need to feel like you're accomplishing something. And I think those kinds of organizations are real rewarding. And then as you get comfortable, volunteer for others.
Greater Good Radio. Connect, learn, heal, and grow. This Greater Good archive video is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com.
Welcome to Greater Good Radio Hawaii, where we develop tomorrow's leaders by bringing you up close and personal with today's top business people. Greater Good Radio Hawaii is dedicated to social entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Evan Leong, and with me is my co-host, Carrie Leong.
Today's guest is Dennis Francis, president and publisher for the Star Bulletin and Midweek newspapers. Please welcome to Greater Good Radio, Dennis Francis. Welcome to our show, Dennis.
Thank you for inviting me.
So as president and publisher, what is it that you do on a daily basis?
Well, it's not real complicated. I manage the daily Star Bulletin newspaper and 2 midweek weekly newspapers that we publish.
Is that busy doing 2 publications? I mean, it's kind of 2, but it seems like 3 because you have 2 midweeks a week.
Right. Well, we publish the Bulletin 7 days a week, and then we have a lot of other products that go along with it. Once we started, obviously, publishing the first midweek, the second one became quite natural. We use a lot of the same staff as we did the first one, so we have a few days break in between to give us some time to publish.
So can you take us in the path of what led you to this position today?
Well, I was born in Kentucky, and there's 2 parts of Kentucky. The one part where I was from was the Appalachia side, the eastern side, more in the coal mining area. My father was a coal miner, and I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. We moved there when I was, I guess, basically an infant. I started the newspaper business there in Ohio at a very small daily.
You started as a writer?
Oh no, I've always been on the business side, started on the circulation side. Actually, when I was, I guess, about 19, 20 years old, I was going to school at a small community college, and back in that era, money was tight, and we were one of those families that didn't qualify for financial assistance, but we didn't obviously have a lot of money either. So as money became tight, I answered an ad in the local daily newspaper for an entry-level management position that we all see from businesses throughout that offer those kinds of positions. And I applied and got the job. And
How old were you when you did that?
I think I was 20, I believe. That's so long ago, It's hard for you to remember. But and I went to continue to go to school for a few more months during that time, and was probably working 75, 80 hours a week at this new position. And I knew that was for me because I really liked it. It was really enjoyable, and I ended up being one of those college dropouts because I loved the career path that I saw.
And what was that position? Because you said entry level, but entry level at 80 hours? I mean, that's a
Well, I'm probably exaggerating. It was probably more like 70. But
I was back when they can get away with 70, 80 hours.
Yeah, well, they had their own problems with the labor issue as it came up later. But the title was district manager, and basically it was just a supervisory position of all of your contractors and the carriers and those kinds of things.
And then how'd you end up in Hawaii?
Well, I received my first promotion when one of our other executives left Ohio and went to South Carolina, and I was still fairly young at that time. I was probably 22 years old. I mentioned that there was this young guy back in Ohio who might be good for this management position in South Carolina, which is where he was. And I was pretty excited to get that first phone call of seeing my career move. I wasn't sure what my next step was, and accepted the position. And I was there for about 6 years, and then went on to Washington, D.C. at another management position in the business side. And I was only there actually for about a year, and then joined the Connect Corporation in 1987, and that was in Burlington, Vermont. I was there for a few years, and one snowy November day when it was getting dark at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a phone call from our corporate headquarters that wanted to interview me in a few days for the vice president of circulation position at the old Hawaii newspaper agency. And it was 17 degrees below zero outside, and they said Hawaii, and the rest is history.
You travel more than people in the military.
How did they get your name, though? Were you applying to different locations?
Well, from Vermont, or we're originally
From, I guess, South Carolina? Was right.
Oh, those were the days, and they still quite popular. But once you get involved with headhunters and executive recruiters, they kind of have your name nationally. You're a revenue source for them, so they always keep calling you to. After a couple of years, you've been somewhere, they want you to go somewhere else, so they can get a fee again. So.
Was it culture shock for you when you first got here to Hawaii?
Yeah, I'd never been. That was at a time where they wouldn't pay for or allow you to come to Hawaii to check it out, so to speak, even though it was a big promotion. The sexiness of it all was just being considered and getting the position. And there wasn't a lot of internet back then.
And the cost is much higher here, right?
Oh, it was considerably higher, yeah. And I was young, so he didn't have hardly any money that he had set aside. And it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because I wouldn't have had that kind of money to put into the home, because back in the late 80s, it was the first real big housing boom that they had in Hawaii, so the costs were already quite high.
Did you think about going home at that point?
No, never considered going home. When I got off the plane, it was 84 degrees, and we had a record in Vermont before I left where we had 12 or 13 straight days where the high never got above 0 Fahrenheit. So that was quite a difference, and I was happy to be in Hawaii and happy to get accustomed to the differences in culture and those kind of things. So it was quite an experience. It was quite a learning curve for the first year or so.
So when you got off of the airplane, was it kind of love at first sight? And you get off and you're like, okay, warm weather, and...
Oh yeah, it was love at first sight. My residence at the time, I think I stayed at the Ilakai Hotel for the first month or two as part of the corporate package. It could be worse, and I just walked around. Well, I've never been to Hawaii, of course, but I walked around Waikiki and see all the palm trees, the blue water. And
you must have been shocked from the prices, though, living right there in Waikiki, coming from the mainland.
Yeah, it was price sticker shock, but you really do get through it, and you figure out ways to economize and either do without certain things that you were having before. But I ended up buying a home, but it was certainly far out on the other side of the island. It was in Makakilo. I don't seem like I've been here that long, but that was before Waikele and Kapolei, so to speak, because there was just Makakilo. When you wanted
that
to
was country.
Country. And it was all cane field, and the cane would still burn, and the trucks would haul away. And I feel like I'm talking about the 70s or something, but it wasn't that long ago. You lived in Makakilo, you had to go to the grocery store in Waipahu.
What do you think is the hardest thing you had to overcome in doing business here in Hawaii?
Probably not making mistakes on mispronouncing things. And, people will sense over a certain amount of time that you had enough time to learn. And if you still fumble some of the Hawaiian names or customs or those kind of things, that you might be on the outside looking in.
I wanted to go back a little bit. You mentioned that you kind of stopped college for a bit because you were really interested in the media. Did you ever finish college?
Nope. I didn't necessarily stop. I dropped out. It was a decision I made at the time. It was easy when you're young. I mean, you're that age and you think that the world is ready for you. And I was earning good money because I was, like I said, I was working 70 hours a week, that time and a half. But I loved what I was doing, and I didn't feel like it was work, unlike things that you did around the home, whatever those things was really work.
Where did you learn your business sense then? Because, it seems like you're a natural leader, natural businessman.
Made some mistakes. And, I know it sounds corny to say school of hard knocks, but, do a lot of reading. You read everything you can. And not necessarily those technical books or those kind of things, but even things like back in the, when I was starting out, the old In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters and those kinds of things, those business books. And you learn to apply some of it, and a lot of it you ignore because it's just not practical. And if you have any social skills at all or any people sense, then you get a feel for how things are being perceived and go from there.
What are some of the more common mistakes you see other business people doing that maybe you've done or maybe you haven't done that you could give some advice on?
I think maybe giving up on things a little too quickly. One of the things I learned a long time ago, because I experienced them, I initiated because it was my bright idea to make some sort of major change in our business, whether it was a pricing action or a complete marketing strategy difference. That the first week, the first month, the first 2 months, people are coming into you with reports and you're looking at them and thinking, I wonder how much longer until I'm fired, because this is obviously not working out to what I had anticipated. And actually, the first time I did something like that, I was in a panic because, again, I was quite young of how wrong I was. And so I went to my boss, who was the publisher of the newspaper at that time, and said, this is really bad. And he was quite patient, and he said, well, why do you think it's bad? And we spent the next couple of hours walking through all the components. And as I started doing that, I found that, well, not everything is bad. I guess there are some things that maybe are coming around. And he pretty much said, well, let's be patient and you need to let the market adjust. I think you made the right call. And sure enough, a month or two later, the whole thing came in what we had anticipated. And if it would have been my decision at that time, and if he would have said, what do you want to do? I would have said, well, let's go back and do the way we used to do it. And that obviously would have been a mistake. And those are the ways that you're certain to not grow and to not get better if you just keep doing the things the way that they've always been. So,
How do you know when it's time to cut a project that you think isn't working?
well, I can honestly say that I've never really cut a project, like completely stopped it or went back to something. What I think is a real skill set, and I try to tell many of my managers over the years, is that being able to recognize a project that is maybe not at certain increments timeline is not working as well as you anticipated, to be able to make adjustments. You can call it changing it on the fly or however you want to categorize it, but not every plan is laid out on paper perfectly. And I'm a big proponent of ready, fire, aim approach, because too many times people get caught up in planning and planning and planning and planning and planning, and by the time you polish off your last page and your last slide on your PowerPoint, then the target is moved, and when you pull the trigger, you're missing something and the target is moved. And you need to be able to make adjustments and have confidence that the base plan that you developed is correct, but maybe some of the elements of the strategies that you've employed are not working and you just change those.
So it's interesting because your philosophy is really entrepreneurial and not real similar to most large corporations.
It sounds like we rehearsed this, but that's a great question, because one of the things that led me to make the career change that I made when I was at the Advertiser and the Hawaii newspaper agency as general manager, that I was sharing some of my thoughts with another local business executive of my dilemma and whether I should make this career move. As we talked, he said, Dennis, I've always felt that you were an entrepreneur in a corporate body. And maybe that's the conflict that I had sometimes when I would not be comfortable or get frustrated with corporate approaches. Not to say that, the corporations, including the Gannett company that I used to work for, were bad or wrong in their approach. It was just a style that didn't really adapt to my strengths.
And how did you find that was adapted by the organization? Because a lot of organizations stuck in bureaucracy don't want to move like that. They think differently.
Yeah, I just got lucky. It wasn't anything real that sticks out in my mind.
You were able to, I guess, crawl up, or you're able to get really to a high position, even though you didn't finish school. Who have you had as a great mentor in your life that really helped you in your career path and the decisions that you made?
I think back from day one, and I've said this to many people, many folks that have worked for me over the years that are looking to move because of their bosses. I've had a lot of great bosses. I'll just throw out a number. I don't know if it's exactly true, but let's say I think I've had maybe 10 bosses. 8 of those were really good and 2 weren't. So you take the ones that you really learn from all 10 of those. And I try to tell folks that you can learn from everybody. And I didn't necessarily have any one mentor. I would say maybe the first boss I had when I first started in the business was probably somebody I really thought about a lot, because that was at a small place and I was able to learn quite a bit when you're in a smaller company.
So being that, I guess you stopped school because you said the money was good on the career side. Where in your career path did you stop and say, hey, this is time to start giving back to the community wherever you were located?
I would say that I probably never really thought about that much. Maybe it was my youth, but until I came to Hawaii. And I think that's one of the things that makes Hawaii special, is that there is a sense of community here and other places on the mainland. But Hawaii has such a strong sense of it that it's a lot easier to want to participate. And it also is natural because I've been here quite a bit longer than I had other places. But I think it's important to participate in the local organizations, whether it's the Hawaii Food Bank, which I'm a board member of, or Diamond Head Theater, or Adult Friends for Youth. They're all quite different. But you need to be able to participate in things outside your normal circle.
Why?
It's just a sense that you're in your business, that you're profiting a lot from folks in the community. You have to go way back and not just say from your big customers, whether it's a CSO company or Sears who are advertising, but the people who are actually going into those stores, the residents, the community members, like us. And you need to participate in a way that's not just in ways that affect maybe the demographics that I live in and across a wide range.
Do you mix the two together, nonprofit work and community work and business, or do you try to keep them separate?
Oh, I think there's a lot of similarities. It's just that nonprofits are nonprofits. But a lot of the things that make a nonprofit very successful are the ones that are ran like a for-profit business.
How are you determining which organizations you want to be a part of? Because I'm sure once you get on one or two and in your position, everybody wants you to pitch in and help out, right?
Exactly. And that's true not just for me, but for a lot of folks in this community. A lot of us are on a lot of different boards, and sometimes it's quite easy. It's one that you have a passion for and that you've been to a function or something and you've seen some of the people and how they help folks in the community. And then sometimes it's very simple. You answer the phone and they asked you and you had a hard time saying no.
Well, that was my next question. What was the first organization that you were involved in? And did you just jump at it and say, definitely, I'll help you out? Or did you have to think about that? Because, like you said, you didn't really think about that too much before you did get involved.
Yeah, I was asked initially to be a part of the Diamond Head Theater, and I didn't know really anything about the local community theater. But I was asked by a friend who was on the board. They had a vacancy, and I felt like it was something that I wanted to do, I wanted to learn. It was not something that I knew really anything about. And quickly within probably that year, I developed a real passion for it. I've been on the board ever since. It's probably certainly the only board that I can say that I've been on for quite some time. And I enjoy it. I was the president for 3 or 4 years, and then the chair for 2 years, and now I'm the immediate past chair. So,
what advice can you give our listeners, those who are nervous about getting into something that they are not really knowledgeable about, but just basically just jumping in and learning? What was that experience like, and what should they do about that?
Well, so I can say Nike, right? Maybe they'll be a sponsor. You just do it. Jump in, listen a lot, and have confidence in yourself that you can and you do have something to contribute. And it's not all about money. People, organizations, the way the money comes in those organizations, it's fundraising and developing. So you as an individual don't necessarily need to participate in a large sense that way, but it's an ability to affect others. And I think if you have that confidence in yourself to be able to do that, then you should do it.
Do you think that it's an important component of doing business in general, getting involved with community events and organizations?
Well, I wouldn't say it's important. I would say it's a must. I think when you get to a certain level in your position in your career, you need to, if you're not doing it now, you need to. And there's so many organizations in this community, so many, we could probably have a whole show on just listing them all, that need key folks in the community to help them. And you're not necessarily sometimes giving your business expertise. Sometimes it's actually they need you to come in and pitch in a night or so a week or even a night a month to help them with things at their place.
Let's talk about Advertiser a little bit then. Since this is part in the back, you moved from the competitor because there's two newspapers. I mean, head to head. There's not like 10 in your space or 20. There's
Right.
two. What made you decide to do that? And then were there ramifications that come with that?
What made me decide to make the switch? Somewhat of a complicated answer because a couple months to make that decision as I was being asked to do that by the owner of the Star Bulletin, David Black. I had initially said no, maybe even 5 times, and declined. So it was never a really easy decision. I was giving up quite a bit career-wise with the Fortune 500 conglomerate, the largest newspaper company in the country, and certainly had a good career with them and had a bright future, at least I think anyway. It was difficult, but in the end, when I made my decision, it was the chance to really take the leap and leave my comfort zone a little bit because I was in kind of a position that was quite comfortable, challenging, but didn't have a lot of risks associated with it. This position as being president of the company, I was number 2 at the Advertiser as general manager, and now I had a chance to be in charge totally. And the difference working in the position I'm in now is I have complete control. And that was one of the things that our owner made quite clear to me. I have complete control of how I want to run these newspapers, both editorially and marketing wise, which certainly at the Advertiser or any publicly held company, you don't have that. You have lots of chain of command and lots of regions and lots of help, so to speak, that are there to say no a lot. And the parameters are a lot tighter, and my parameters are quite wide where I am. So that was one of the key components of what made me make the decision.
You've been there for a while now at the Star Bulletin, which has substantially less resources than a huge corporate conglomerate. Do you have any regrets?
No, I'll certainly be honest to say the first month or so was really strange for me after having so long competed against when the split of the two newspapers occurred in 2000. That had happened took a while to adjust to, and I don't have any regrets at all. The position, I've enjoyed the challenge, I've enjoyed the competition. The difficulty is that the other side took it quite personal, and I can see why they would. I was there for a long time and held their belief of why we should be winning the newspaper war, and now I'm on the other side. So I look at it as when I would get into some verbal battles with folks, is that it happens in sports all the time. Their star player for the Red Sox is now playing for the Yankees, and they're two big rivals, and the fans boo them when they come to the other place, and they expect it. I don't expect people to praise me, love me where I used to work. I hope they respect me, but that's the only thing that I can hope for.
When you talk about competition, did you feel that you had a competitive edge, being that you kind of knew the advertiser strategy and what they were trying to focus on?
Yeah, that was a unique possibility for me, that I knew that here I was on my career path once I got into this business, that I had a chance to be the president, I had the chance to be the publisher of a daily newspaper, and I didn't have to leave Hawaii, which I never will. I love it here. And I knew the competition as well as they did themselves, because I was part of the senior management team, understood a lot of the ways that the company operated and those kind of things. So that did give me a unique advantage, because on their side, they could only guess from what I know now, but I know both. Obviously, things have changed since then, and they're off on different things, and I don't know all the things, but I still been in business a long time. I can guess pretty well.
When you moved to the Star Bulletin and you initially got there, what was the biggest challenge moving into the number 1 spot at that point, and then also, the other side of the fence, I guess?
I think the biggest challenge, when it wouldn't have mattered whether I was at the Star Bulletin or if I went back to a newspaper on the mainland, is just getting the people in place. And I think that's quite natural when time there's a leadership change, that the people that you're comfortable working around you are really important for you, both for your style, because sometimes folks can't adapt to your style, and I've seen that work real well, and I've seen it work very poorly. So I felt that the biggest immediate challenge was to get the people in place.
And then how do you go about doing that, though? You go out and you recruit them, you try to find people that are similar to you. What is there a strategy with that?
There were certainly people I thought highly of, certainly at the Advertiser. I thought highly of a lot of people, but I couldn't afford to hire them all, so I hired some.
So how do you determine, though, when you're trying to find your upper level management, your key people, that they're not BSing you when they're interviewing with you?
It's never a slam dunk. We've certainly made some mistakes, and I think everybody could say that they've hired a person or two that's interviewed real well and then, fell flat on their face. But if you're any good at all, that's only going to happen probably 10% of the time. I think you just have to have a good sense for it. You ask enough questions that aren't necessarily a yes or no answer. It's enough to give you a feel as to how well they know the business.
I had a question a little bit about your career path. Did you ever feel that there was a inferiority complex because you didn't get the college education that people are getting? And, everyone's going up to your master's. What was your perspective on that? Did you just feel, you know what, I'm just as good as everyone else. I know just as much as them.
I certainly never had an inferiority complex. I had, all the way back to when I was a department head in South Carolina, I had MBAs, young MBAs who were working for me. That's pretty much been throughout my career path. I've always had lots of folks who certainly have a high formal education. I think if I was advising someone and they were going to do what I did, I would tell them not to. It's easy to stay in school, just like my mother tried to tell me. Because it worked for me, it doesn't mean it's going to work for the masses. A good college degree and a good education as I'm hiring folks. Certainly, if I'm looking at an application or a resume and they, finished high school versus someone that even just has a 4-year degree or if they have a master's degree, that lands on top of the pile. And that's the first person that I'm going to talk to. Now, once we make that hire, then that person has to deliver. And if I happen to have someone either who worked their way up and only finished it through the high school level and they're delivering and the other person isn't, then I'm going to start looking at this other person, because in the end, it's all about results.
So on the television show Apprentice, they had this whole challenge between the book smart people and the street smart people.
I was rooting for the street smart people.
Yeah, so was I. But what do you think is more important, book smarts or street smarts? You need both? Is one more important than the other?
You need both. But I have to say, and this is just from my experience and my own opinion, of course, and you have someone certainly argue the other side, that at least in the newspaper business, most of the folks who have been real successful and have moved through a good career path have started at a lower level. It doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't go to school. They have degrees and those kind of things. But the real important thing is to hire in at a level where you can learn the operation completely and not start at the top third level. And let's face it, and this is the good side, downside to having, say, an MBA, you're going to be hired at a pretty high level to begin with. And if you don't understand the business well enough, then you don't really immediately get the respect and the loyalty of really all the folks that make the company click. And that's all of the staffers and all of the other folks that you have to lead. If they don't believe you and they don't trust you and they don't think you really understand the business and you're leading them down the wrong path, you're going to be in trouble. Because ultimately every company to succeed needs their employees to deliver for them. And one person isn't going to make that happen.
And then what about people skills? Because people skills are very important. In your business, do you think that the people skills are more important than the actual knowledge of the mechanics?
I don't know how to run the press. Don't get me. So that's actually a complex part of our business. But yeah, people skills are probably the most important, I think, because if you have people skills and you have a good sense of your common sense, because you have to make a lot of decisions quickly, and the folks who succeed make quick decisions. They don't ponder it for a while. They don't get committees together. They don't get the focus groups, and they make quick decisions. And you have to have certain amounts of information to be able to make those decisions, but you make them quickly. And I think that's what makes people succeed.
So as you were talking about leadership and being a leader, what do you think are the qualities of being a good leader?
I think certainly fair is one. Being able to articulate a plan to your team, a direction, being decisive. To me, there's nothing worse than watching folks who are in senior positions that can't make a decision, or they make it slow. It frustrates people. People are working all around you really hard, and their gears are high gear and they're going, and then they need to keep moving. And if you don't make those decisions quickly enough, then it slows them down. And then I think ultimately being someone with a good sense of humor. You can laugh at yourself, laugh at others, and when you laugh at them as the boss, they don't get embarrassed by it. Because you know why? Because they've laughed at you too, and you've been cool with it. And it just kind of fosters the team spirit a lot more, and people don't get their feelings so hurt.
What are some things that leaders can do to foster entrepreneurship in their organizations, especially if the organizations are quite large?
Just try to get people thinking, try to get people to be creative, show a lot of initiative. You know, you see a lot of folks these days that tend to wait for people to tell them what to do or how to do it, even though they probably know how to do it or have better thoughts. So you need to have folks who have ability to feel comfortable about sharing their ideas.
You had mentioned that you had made a lot of mistakes along the way that have taught you lessons. Are you able to share with us some of those mistakes that you made that made you a better person, that made you a better leader, that made you a better business person?
Well, I just tell you about the first one. We were changing the price on one of our products, and we were changing it quite dramatically.
Up or down?
Up, of course. And after the first couple of weeks, the revenue numbers came in, and they were quite substantially less than what we had anticipated. And we had all of the right marketing approach, all the right ideas as we were checking how things were moving along, all the pieces, all those were working, and we just weren't getting the results. And as I said earlier, I was ready to change it back. And we were waited and were patient enough to work it through and ended up being quite successful, actually.
You said you kind of waited it out. Is that because you just wanted to see what would happen?
Well, to be honest, we waited it out because the person that I was reporting to at the time insisted, because I was really thinking that we should go back. And he's obviously was a lot smarter than I and had a lot more experience and had seen these things before. And to be honest, I think he was teaching me because I was young. He was teaching me to let me, because he kept asking me, what do you think? And how's this going? How's that going? And he was asking about all the components of our plan. And as we walked all the way through it, I was waiting for him to be angry. And he said, well, as you can see, he says, that not everything is going poorly here. You've got some good signs. And I still today have some of these issues is where I ended up going right to the bottom line. And it was ignoring some of the other signs and the indications and indicators that said things are going quite well.
What would you be doing today if you weren't in the publishing business?
Gosh, I don't know. When I was in school, I was going to school as an accountant. That wouldn't have worked. Even when I was in high school, I was quite a bit of trouble when I was in high school because I didn't pay attention much. That's a whole other story for another show one day. But I really don't know. I think probably something along the lines that would have said I can work my way into this organization, improve myself, and it would have said any career that said entry-level manager position. You see them at the ads, whether it's a fast food chain or banks, all kinds of retail establishments that say assistant managers or those kinds of things. And those are folks with not a lot of experience needed that open the stores and closes them and does a lot of things. And I certainly was able to see that those were ways that I could maybe make this work by not finishing school and been able to learn an organization, be able to have myself as the only thing that's going to hold me back.
Do you consider yourself a lucky person?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that because there's a lot of people have asked me over the years. Most of my career, I was always one of the youngest every step of the way. As a matter of fact, my first position, my publisher, when he announced me, asked me not to share my age because I was 25 years old and said most people are much older than you and it would be a problem. But yeah, I consider myself very lucky, and I also had several opportunities, several situations where I was literally in the right place at the right time. If it had been any other, a year or two earlier or later, the whole thing could have been much different for me. I think I'm sure I would have been successful, but maybe certainly not in Hawaii. Who knows where I bet. So you have to have a little bit of luck.
What would you say in your career or your life so far has been your greatest challenge to overcome? And then what'd you learn from it? How'd you overcome it?
Public speaking? No, I'm not sure. That's a tough question. Again, the other thing that comes to mind is my golf game.
Well, opposite of that, what would you say is your greatest life accomplishment?
My greatest life accomplishment would be where I am today. Truly, 20 years ago, if someone said to me that I was going to be the president and publisher of a newspaper the size of the Star-Bulletin and the 2 midweek papers, I would have found that far-fetched. I said, geez, that's nice, but I don't see how I could ever achieve that. And the Star-Bulletin as a daily newspaper there's roughly 1,400 or so daily newspapers in America, and they're dailies, and the Star-Bulletin is still probably in the 175th, 190th range, and I'm just guessing as far as size. So that's still a significant size newspaper in America.
If you had a chance to redo something in your career or life even, what would you redo?
Well, after all this discussion about not finishing school, I'd probably be that. As long as I was still able to achieve what I did, yeah.
Do you think that you're gonna stay in Hawaii after you finish working?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love Hawaii. When I go to the mainland, I just came back on a business trip to the East Coast and I was gone 10 days. And every time I come back, as soon as I get off the plane and the trade winds hit me, it's a great feeling. I don't grumble so much about the traffic when I leave the airport. I'm just happy to be home. And Hawaii is a unique place. It's a special place. And I don't see me ever leaving Hawaii.
Are you able to give some last advice to our listeners? Those who didn't finish college, those who have hit kind of a high point in their career at a young age, and then also just in general for the business people.
Well, first of all, I think just follow your instincts. Most people have pretty good instincts and they just don't trust them. Because even I think I have good instincts and I didn't early on believe mine. But when I made up my mind to do what I wanted to do and to follow them, I think most of the time you're going to come out better for it. But secondly, as you follow your instincts, so you do things that you want to do with your life, don't be afraid to adjust in mid-course. I've seen some people that are just, no, I'm going to do this. And you think, well, just a slight adjustment might make this a lot more palatable for you. So be willing to change, be willing to adjust a course if need be. And that's both in personal life and your business life.
Do you remember any tipping point in your career, somewhere where things just kind of broke through and it just started rolling from that point?
Well, I probably thought that about 5 different times because every time as I moved into a new position, into a different paper or a different situation, I thought this is a great job. This is a great place to live. I've really done well for myself and I got a great home and all these things. But eventually something else even better came along. But I can honestly say where I've been successful, and that's great, but every situation I was in before, I was still there doing it. I've been perfectly fine and very happy. I have great drive and I'm competitive and I'm very aggressive, but I'm also, on the other hand, I'm not looking to step on anyone on the way up, so to speak. And it's worked out for me and in the situations that presented itself. And I weighed the opportunity, both pros and cons, and I moved. I did those things to make my career and grow better. So,
if there's one specific message that you can send out from this entire interview today to our listeners, what would that one message be?
Try to get involved in the community in ways that not only benefit and help yourself grow, but also have impacts with the masses. And try to, at least if it's your first time or two, to get involved in an organization. Get involved in something that's more grassroots, that you can, because you'll need to feel like you're accomplishing something. You'll need to feel part of something. And I think those kinds of organizations are real rewarding. And then as you get comfortable, volunteer for others.
Why is the Star Bulletin the local people's choice for newspapers?
I think it was the early 90s, the Star Bulletin was always the larger newspaper. So the Star Bulletin had a long history of being the larger newspaper for most of the time that both newspapers have been publishing. Only in the early 90s did the Advertiser surpass it. So I think that that's just one sense that it has that local style. It was also, I think, the style of Chin Ho, who was the original owner of the Star Bulletin before he sold it to Gannett. And it's just carried over throughout the years. We're certainly have the ability to focus more on that than maybe our counterpart because it's just my call. There's not really anyone else to weigh in on those decisions. And when you're part of a conglomerate, you have parameters. They certainly have ability to make changes and they certainly have ability to give direction to news approaches, but there's walls that they eventually run up against, even by the design of the newspaper itself.
Why should people read the Star Bulletin?
Well, I think we're certainly different. We try to prove that that's why there are 2 newspapers, that the content is not always the same. If there's something going on in the legislature, a new law was passed that where both newspapers are going to cover those things. But I think you'll see a lot more emphasis on our newspaper covering local issues. And it's more of a challenge for us because we don't have the same size staff as the Honolulu Advertiser.
And then why should people advertise with the Star Bulletin?
Well, one of the things that we do real well is we bundle the Star Bulletin along with 2 weekly newspapers that are direct mailed to every home on the island. So we have a lot of options available for coverage. We have our own niche in the marketplace. We have good readership levels, and We charge a reasonable and appropriate price for our level of circulation and what we offer with our midwing newspapers.
You mentioned golf, Dennis. How would you liken golf to business?
Well, there's a lot of similarities, actually. You need to have patience. You need to be aggressive at times. You need to have a good temperament. And you certainly need to have a good tempo. And there's a good pace about how things work, even in your business life. There are a lot of similarities, and you do learn a lot about individuals and people. You're spending 4 or 5 hours on a golf course with someone. You better have something to come out of that other than you just enjoying it. Let's face it, most of us, and I would say probably the vast majority of golfers, aren't going to shoot really low scores. We're out there to compete, and we're reasonably okay, but have a good time and be able to talk with other folks in the business community. So those are the similarities.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis Francis, for joining us today on Greater Good Radio Hawaii.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.